Hello and welcome to our first Red Talk here at Commerce IQ, where we invite experts across the industry to discuss retail e-commerce management and how they go about their day-to-day managing different topics. So today I'm joined by Michael Benike from Hallmark, who's a colleague of mine who helps to manage the data and marketing analytics at Hallmark. My name's Ryan Abernathy. I am a customer success director at Commerce IQ, and today we'll be discussing a number of different topics, specific to advertising and sales across Hallmark's team, but also retail e-commerce as a whole. So welcome, Michael.
Thanks, Ryan. Happy to be here.
So I think we'll get started, and I think we've seen the industry change a lot over the past decade, but also a few years due to a number of unspoken reasons. I guess the first question would be, how has your experience changed, with regards to solving problems with a tech-assisted solution versus, the prior way of doing things in a more people-centric and less automated fashion?
Sure. Well, luckily, I am still young enough in my career where I haven't been in a place, especially as I've been working with e-commerce and digital, where I haven't had to work without a tool at any point, really. I think the thing that's really changed in the 7 or so years I've been working on Amazon and other digital channels is the efficiency of those tools. I think when I first started out, a lot of it was manual aggregation of data across a massive amount of tool sets, which you'd take a massive amount of time to build your data structures up on the back end. You would do something in Power BI that would take a lot of time, or some other tool along those lines where you'd have to integrate and aggregate data across all these different tools. And then your front end was a different tool on top of that. So you don't really have a lot of good customer-facing ways to present all of that data in one place without there being a massive amount of work going on in the back end. And I think that's really what I've seen especially in the last 5 years of acceleration from a tool perspective, is that those tools like CIQ have gotten a lot better at integrating all the data we used to have to pull manually into one place. So it's really the efficiency. I know when I first started in these businesses, I was spending a lot of my week just cleaning data up over and over and over again to get to a point where we could actually just report out in a way that was actionable for my teams. And now we're at a point where I can get all of my data consolidated on a Monday morning in an hour or two across all of the places I need to see, have the data story ready for the team by Monday afternoon, and have an action plan ready to go for how we need to optimize the business for the week.
Yeah, I guess to go off that, you see the industry, or at least retailers, moving back to a more, rugged, rigid way of doing things, and these tools becoming more prominent and necessary. I think I've seen personally just data quality almost regress in the past, year or so, which makes the tech solutions even more prominent now.
Yeah, for sure. And I think we all, speaking specifically from an Amazon perspective, I think we've all had frustration with the customer or the CX of things like brand analytics or trying to pull data out of an Amazon advertising. And with all of the way that the algorithm changes over the years, or from month to month or day to day, it seems like sometimes on Amazon, being able to pull all that data together without having to do a bunch of manual backend work is going to be more and more important to be able to pivot as quickly as the retailers that we're working with are pivoting.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. I think going off Amazon, how are you guys, and you specifically, making those strategic decisions for Amazon, as you're bringing up, but also other channels? And do you use any specific reporting metrics or recommendations to help drive those decisions?
Yeah, I think a lot of the way that we work as a team has really been, we've luckily had really good leadership vision on this team, to where when I first started, we were 4 or 5 people working on this business. And now that we've grown, we're a team of 50 at any given time across all of our functions. But we've had, during that time frame, the way that the team has interacted with each other hasn't really changed. So I come from an IT background and agile management and all that fun stuff. And our Amazon team works pretty similarly to how you'd see an IT project work, where we basically have weekly sprints. It's stand-ups with the teams, trying to figure out what the best work set or use cases are to work on for the week, where we can continue optimizing our product, which in this case is our digital channels, and especially Amazon, to be better than it was the week before. So I think a lot of it is just team structure. I think you've got to have a dedicated team in place to be able to facilitate those quick changes. And you've got to have an integrated team that can come into a stand-up meeting and understand all of the context that's happening, because of that, that's the way the flywheel works across all of these digital channels. Is you've got to be able to connect the dots across all of the functions. So everybody has to have the same context, or you can't move forward quickly. I think the other side of it is obviously data. And that's where my team comes in, and that's where our relationship with CIQ comes in. You've got to be able to get to that data quickly, and you have to have a team who understands how to read that data. So data literacy is a really big part of it too. And that's my job as an analytics manager across all of the data that we receive from our digital partners, is to make sure that when we present data to a team, it's a coherent story that they can action, so that they're not having to take times out of their strategic and executional work to understand and dig through layers and layers of data to get to the actions they need as well. So it really comes down to team structure, and then the data structure and data efficiency, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, going off that, first of all, kudos to you for doing this, but you guys have a pretty complex and robust advertising program and strategy that I think you really helped build and lead the charge on. I'd love to hear a little bit about how you managed to do that, especially, with regards to just, building on, honestly, another question I have, seasonality. Obviously, it's a concern for any business, but Hallmark being Hallmark, you may be the most affected company by seasonality, and at least the US, if not the world. So I think you probably have some good context on that.
It is Christmas all year round here, for sure. Yeah. Our marketing and our internal advertising strategy really came by necessity, honestly. The first couple of years I worked on this business, we tried a couple different third-party agencies to help run our business, and with the amount of SKUs that we have, we're over 4,000 SKUs at any given time. And the seasonality of our business, as you touched on, there's no way we can work with a third party that understands our product and our needs enough, without having somebody dedicated from that third party agency sitting in all of our team stand-ups. Like they don't have the depth of knowledge across our product categories, or how we need to execute a season in order to actually run our advertising in a way where they can connect the dots well enough to push our products to where we need it to go. So that's really where our advertising strategy came from, and why we have an internal team that runs our advertising, because we're the product experts here at Hallmark. We have a team that understands how our consumer should be shopping our product. We've got a lot of experience from a digital perspective at this point, for between search term analysis and historical data, to tell us what the most efficient way to show up for our consumers is across the keywords we need to play in. So that's really how we handle the complexity in-house. It's a lot of lift, but when you look at the financials of having to move between third-party agencies, or having to pay a third-party agency, or just hiring people from a full-time salary perspective to run the business and really know it, and to be able to sit with the team and work through issues in real time that we have, especially with 60 to 70% of our sales for most seasons coming in the last 2 to 3 weeks. You've got to be quick, you've got to be agile, and you've got to have people on the team who know what they're doing and have the context to be able to run something like run hundreds and hundreds of SKUs across advertising.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Have you, and hopefully the answer is yes, have you seen your advertising efficiency improve since you've done this? But then also, since you've consolidated your tech stack and moved more towards the self-service model, rather than that third-party model?
Yeah, I think like everybody else, we probably have some data noise from the COVID period, where it feels like we didn't have to do much to convert on anything for a while there. So I'm sure some of our data is inflated over the last couple of years, but I will say, as we've had to restabilize coming out of COVID, that we have seen continued improvements as we've been utilizing the data and like CIQ to really dig into the data we do have. So last year we were up 19% in ROAS, and we did that with a 16% decrease in our cost per click, despite all of our categories, as I'm sure everybody's experiencing, getting more and more competitive with third-party competitors and all of the other fun algorithm stuff we've seen on Amazon over the last couple of years. So I think CIQ has been a large part of that. And part of it's because of the efficiency that we get from how we're able to pull that data out when we do need to pull it, or when I just need to go see data real time in the tool itself. I mean, I've kind of touched on this in one of the earlier questions, but we used to spend an entire day just pulling data out of Amazon advertising portal itself with how, you have to go into every campaign and every ad group and export multiple reports and aggregate those, and then have a tool that consolidates all of those data sources into something that you can actually use to report on. Now we have a 10-minute pool on Mondays that I do and consolidate from our CIQ data. And I think part of that too is just how granular we can get because of how efficient those tools are. So being able to pull down to a search term level or pull down to an ASIN level has been extremely important to us with how most of our product is unique at a SKU level. It's hitting against a specific keyword, or it's even within just something like a greeting card, a birthday card versus a wedding card, or even birthday card for wife versus birthday card for son. Like there's just so many differences that we need to be able to get down to at a SKU level and a search term level that CIQ helps us get to, that we've actually taken the way that we are able to get data from CIQ at that granular level, and we've restructured our campaigns and portfolios in a way that allows us to utilize that data as best as we can. What that looks like is smaller ad groups, or in some cases, even ASIN level campaigns, where we're able to control and optimize at the most granular level possible in order to push the product as efficiently as we can. One other thing I do want to touch on from a seasonal complexity standpoint is that it really all starts with our operations team. We have a dedicated operations team that only works on e-commerce for us. So that's a big part of how we win at seasons. If you can't get the product to Amazon, or you can't produce the product in time, you can't sell it, you can't market it, you can't do anything with it. And because of the way our production schedule works, we're planning production 12 months to 16 months ahead of time. So we're working with the best data sets that we have at any given time in order to forecast out a year in advance, sometimes when we don't even have data for what we're forecasting for yet for the current year. But it really comes down to having that integrated operations team who handles making sure that we've got all of these SKUs at the quantities we think we can sell at the right time at the right place.
Yeah, not to get too far off track, but how are you guys reacting to some of the logistical constraints Amazon or other retailers are having in today's macroeconomic environment?
Frustratingly.
That's about right. Yeah.
But I mean, we really try to keep the mindset that we can control what we control. We're obviously partnering with our vendor managers and in-stock managers as much as we can to figure out where they're sitting right now and where their heads are at, to try to figure out how much inventory we can get in for specific seasons, or even on the everyday side in some cases, how we can get enough coverage in order to cover the demand that we think we should be having. But we're also working through a couple other different fulfillment methods in order to offset some of those capacity issues that we're seeing. So we're moving more and more of our sales mix and inventory mix into direct fulfillment out of our own facilities. So we will be looking to handle that in a large way this year. And our ops team is moving mountains to just scale the capacity that it takes to make up some of the demand that Amazon isn't purchasing right now. And we're also exploring direct import with Amazon for the first time this year, so that we never end up touching the product. They just pick up our product at port and get it. That should also help us with some of the inventory delays that we saw last year for things like Christmas, where hopefully we don't have any of the capacity constraints where we were seeing some things take like a month or a month and a half to get received at Amazon after we ship from our own FCs. So hopefully we get everything in on time, and those fulfillment methods between direct fulfillment and direct import, and a couple other things that we're exploring as well, vendor flex, if we can get that to work out, helps us offset some of the capacity constraints that we've seen hit our shipments this year.
Yeah, I think the folks who have all those levers at their disposal have seen a lot of success in just reducing unavailability and also increasing selling periods from what we see. So, you guys are set up for success by doing that. Going back to, advertising, I think with the current macroeconomic environment, what does the future of your strategy look like, specifically in regards to balancing organic versus paid placements?
Yeah, our glide path has always been to spend upfront as much as we can in the couple of years that we were growing in order to get to the place where our organic placement is doing the majority of the lift. And I think that's still our strategy. I don't think we're unique in the fact that we have a glide path that tells us that we have to spend less as a percentage of our revenue as we continue to grow and try to be a profitable business on Amazon. I think that there's been some headwinds from an Amazon algorithm perspective for 1P folks over the last couple of years that we've seen in particular, that has kind of thrown a little bit of a wrench into that strategy, where there are places where it looks like our paid strategy isn't resulting in the organic placement that we used to see, or the share of voice that we used to see across some of our larger keywords. But I don't think that changes our strategy much. I think it changes how we look at the KPIs for advertising. It changes looking at from looking at top line and ordered product sales to looking at ROAS and conversion and those efficiency metrics. I think it also turns into a more structured, variated approach when it comes to how we present our product on Amazon. I think it means that we only push our best performers in marketing, rather than when we've started, we kind of started with a full circle approach where we just pushed everything to see how it worked, to get the data, to see how Amazon was going to push those things. And I don't think we can do that from a sustainability perspective going forward. I think we have to push the things that are returning the best, that are converting the best, and then variate the lower performers with those high performing advertising SKUs, so that they still get the halo traffic, but we're not banging our heads against a wall trying to get them to return and convert in advertising.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Yeah, it's great to hear you have a plan for continuing to expand.
Yeah, I will say that sorry for interrupting you there.
Oh, you're good.
The other way that we continue to do this is, I think we've seen over the years that Amazon advertising is basically just another data set to analyze and to build strategy off of. So that's one thing that our team has moved away from. We used to hire for traditional marketing experience, and we don't do that anymore. We hire for analytical experience, and that's part of why our team has integrated what has become my role, which is the analytics and marketing manager for our Amazon team, because we've really seen that you have to be able to dig into the data from a marketing perspective, and all of the KPIs that AA gives us, or that our DSP team gives us, and things along those lines, in order to actually optimize. So it's a very, very analytical role, where I think if you don't have somebody who has that analytical experience that only has the traditional marketing experience, you're gonna run into some headwinds.
Yeah, would you say, I mean, you guys are set up for success across your advertising based on how you guys are currently running it. Would you say that applies to other vendors as well, or do they need to take some of the early steps you guys took before hiring someone into that more analytical role rather than traditional marketing?
Yeah, for some of the omni-channel side of things, so something like a Walmart.com or some of those other big retailers, I think a similar structure works really well. And I think we've seen some of our teams who I do have a little bit of input into some of our other omni-channel retailers, but those analytics are managed elsewhere. But I think those teams have seen the success we've seen on Amazon with how you integrate marketing data with sales data, with operations data, and how you have to have a team who understands that complexity across the entire context of the platform in order to be successful. So I think in those particular cases, my recommendation would be to integrate as much as you can from an analytics perspective, from a team structure perspective. I think there are places like direct to consumer businesses still, which I do consult on a little bit. I used to run our analytics as a whole for our direct to consumer Hallmark.com business as well. It's a little bit different on that side because the marketing is more traditional. You know, you're sending out email blasts to folks. You're catching people in our brick and mortar who will maybe shop on a Hallmark.com or something along those lines too. So there's a little bit of a difference there, where I think you still have to have the analytical prowess to be able to connect the dots across your marketing and your other sales analytics or operational analytics, but you also have to have people who understand that traditional marketing on the direct to consumer side. I don't think that's going to change anytime soon.
No, that makes absolute sense. I think that's a good transition to, you guys have a ton of best practices for how to run Amazon and some of the other large retailers, e-retailers. How does that transfer over to some of the less traditional retailers other than Amazon, Walmart? marketplaces, and then also direct to consumer? What are you able to lift and shift, and what just doesn't make sense?
I think the biggest thing that we've seen work across multiple omni and direct to consumer in our Amazon business as a whole is to really design product from the ground up with the digital consumer in mind. Because I think one of the major differences we've seen, I mean, Hallmark's been around for 100 years doing this, and we've been like 100% brick and mortar for 90 of those years. So the consumer who's going into a store to shop, who's going into a Walmart, who's going into a Hallmark Gold Crown store is very, very different from what we've seen from a digital perspective. Luckily, most channels that we have gives us good data on how a consumer is shopping, what they're searching for, search frequency data on Amazon, things along those lines, where we started transitioning a couple of years ago in most of our digital businesses to creating products specifically based off of that analysis. Because we saw the Amazon consumer as a whole is very price conscious. So we see places that Hallmark honestly hadn't played very much in the past. So things like value classroom cards for Valentine's Day, or tri-packs or quad packs of wrapping paper, or high count cards, what we call our packaged expressions business. We don't have large portions of like that product doesn't exist in most of our brick and mortar spaces. But we've seen it work really well for us on Amazon because it was designed specifically to work well on Amazon. But what we found over the years is as we've taken that product to our direct to consumer businesses, as we've taken that product to something like a Walmart.com, it's also worked there. So the consumer who's shopping digitally is generally looking for the same trends that we're seeing across our omni-channel network, but also the data that Amazon gives us for search frequency and some of those other market basket reports, and that we can consolidate through CIQ and see how we're showing up in those spaces, or whether we're converting well in those spaces. What we've designed has worked well elsewhere as well. So I think that's the big takeaway. The product design is just very different for digital than it is for the consumer who's shopping in store. I think, and I touched on this before as well, the other best practice is you've got to build a team from the ground up who understands the complexity. And I've already touched on that a ton, so I won't go too deep, but you've got to have folks who understand the context and connect the dots regardless of their function. It can't just be the analyst on a team who understands how the full flywheel is working. It's got to be the product folks. It's got to be the operations folks. And I think without that foundational team structure, you're probably not going to be able to scale to the point that to the success that you'd want to see.
Yeah, no, love to hear it. I think pivoting a little, and our one shameless plug is would love to hear a little bit about how Commerce IQ does help your day to day. I think you've touched on, data consolidation and integrity and being able to get that really quick. What are some of the other, top 1 to 2 main areas that we've been able to assist with?
Yeah, CIQ has been a great partner. We've kind of grown up together here as our businesses have evolved. We were on the ground running with you guys, and I think one of the best parts about our partnership is that you've designed. There's a lot of places in the tools that you guys have helped design based off of our feedback. Things like the serviceability metrics that are built into the tool now to tell us. We have a lot of SKUs, as I mentioned. So across all of those SKUs, are we actually selling? Is Amazon? Are we showing up on Amazon the way that we should be from an in-stock position or from an inventory position? We used to pull all of our share of voice data by taking the team as a whole and splitting up various keywords and having people go out directly to those search engine result pages and count the amount of spaces that we were winning versus our competitors. And we obviously don't do that anymore. With the market insights report that you guys give us, we've utilized those reports pretty heavily in our discussions with our vendor managers during ABN in places where we think we are the strategic partner in the spaces that we should be playing in. It doesn't feel like we're always the strategic partner in those spaces. So we've utilized those reports quite a bit, and they've been super helpful in just being able to present hard data back to our vendor managers in places where we feel like we could use some of Amazon's partnership in the growth that we're both expecting to see for our businesses. Our operations team runs basically completely off of CIQ data at this point. So they're pulling in the serviceability, they're pulling in all of our on-hand data, the PO data flowing through. You guys have helped us with chargebacks this year from some of the late shipments and other things that have fallen through the cracks in the past because Amazon sends you $1 million or a 1,000,000 row spreadsheet to try to audit those kind of things, and there's just not the the manual capacity to do those kind of things. So operations is basically run completely through our CIQ data that we receive at this point. I think long story short, we're using CIQ for basically any data that we're pulling at this point. We have some custom solutions that we pull through Tableau and a couple other front end solutions from an analytics perspective, but even most of that data is just an export and then kind of a cleaning to get into a way that we can share with our external team partners and things along those lines. So like I mentioned, Commerce IQ has been a great partner, and most of our business practices are built around the data that we get from you guys at this point.
Yeah, I mean, same could be said for Hallmark. And to your point, a lot of the roadmap is derived from working with, you guys and helping you guys diagnose the issues and, figure out what we need to build to make your lives easier. And I'm glad you've seen that happen and been heard. I think, last question before we really wrap up on, and still on the theme of the, tech stack, I think most companies right now are really trying to do some form of consolidation, whether that be everything or just certain functions. And I'd love to get just some of your input on what the idea of basically an integrated command center of sorts across retailers, marketplaces, and all functions looks like to you, and how and what the benefits would be of doing something like that.
Yeah, I think really it would just help with digital data literacy from a Hallmark perspective as a whole, or not just Hallmark, but I'm sure there's benefits across every company that would do this. We are getting better at this as a company, but our data teams are kind of in silos still across a lot of our different retailers. And I think a consolidated stack for our digital businesses, because as we've talked about, a lot of the trends that we see on Amazon as our major digital business, we also see across the other channels, but we'd love to have the data to back up what our whole digital network looks like as a whole. We share a lot of SKUs across a lot of our retailers as well. And being able to just understand at a SKU level what's working where, are the trends the same everywhere? Are we seeing price war issues across multiple channels? Who's starting those kind of things would just be a huge win overall. I think our Amazon business is no longer in the infancy stage, but I think a lot of our other digital businesses outside of our direct to consumer space are still in their infancy stage. And I think being able to bring everybody onto a standard set of KPIs in a standard tool set where everybody's using the same nomenclature would just be a huge win to be able to scale those other omni-channel businesses in the way that we've scaled Amazon over the last 6 years.
Yeah, no, love to hear it. And, know it's a want, need, and on our roadmap to hopefully get to that point someday here in the near future. That's everything I had today. Appreciate you taking the time out as always. I know we're in touch fairly often. Appreciate your time, and I think we can wrap up unless you have anything else you want to touch on.
Sounds good. Thank you, Ryan. This was fun.
Yeah, thanks, Michael. We'll talk later.
Right. Take care.